We live? We're live! Fantastic! Hello and welcome, lowly adventurers, to Performance Check. My name is Rob, and today this is the first of my brand new video series entitled Critical Conversations. And with me, I have been blessed to have two of the brightest stars of the online role-playing community. They are half of Absolute Tabletop and 100% of the hit YouTube channel Tabletop Terrors. I welcome Tim and James Kearney to the conversation. Hey guys.
He said our name right.
He said our name right.
Rob, you're the first person maybe in the history of our lives who have said that properly before we have had to correct them. We usually get a Kearney or a Kearney.
You see, the thing is, I did spend most of the day rehearsing that. And I don't mean just what I just said. I mean just your name.
Just the name.
Because, I mean, luckily, I watched your latest Dragon Grin campaign. And thankfully, Matt Click said your surname. And I was like, yes, I need to remember that. They have issues. I mean, I've had issues with my name before. So
let's start with that. Is it
okay?
Coletta?
It's Coletta. Yeah, it's Coletta.
Awesome. What do you usually get? Do you usually get like Coletta, Coletta?
Colita, Colette, Beretta. They just completely.
It's not even trying.
Yeah. They're not even trying, and it's frankly, it does hurt me somewhat. But we're not here to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about you guys, your methods of playing a role-playing game and running a role-playing game. This is, after all, why we're here. So I'm going to start with a simple one today. And, well, hopefully it'll be simple. We'll see. I would like you guys to tell me, do you remember the first world the first world in a role-playing game that you played in? Now, whether that's running it or as a player. Do you guys remember? And these questions are obviously going to be directed at both of you at all times, so feel free, whoever wants to answer first.
Mine is real easy because Tim actually took my brothers, or at least one of my brothers and I, we went to sort of an organized play back when 3.5 came out.
Yes.
Living Greyhawk. So it was in I think Greyhawk is the name of the campaign world. That was my first one. Yeah, without a doubt, that's an easy one for me.
So I remember that, and it was interesting the way that they ran the Greyhawk. It's interesting. They would make it so that you were in the location as a character based on your geographic location as a human person.
I did not know that.
So we were in Florida. So Florida was the Principality of Ulick. So it was actually it's cool in theory. So
it's cool until you want to play in someone else's principality.
Exactly.
I think I've heard something about this actually. That's absolutely fantastic. So the whole world that you're saying then, the setting is laid out in terms of where you are in the real world.
Exactly. And I don't know how far it went. We only played, obviously in the United States. So I don't know like how they handled the UK. What happens if someone visits, they're in our principality, but if I go to the UK and play organized, am I just?
I would imagine they split it up for us and for other countries. Maybe they split it up for like European countries.
That probably makes
where
sense.
It's like the Principality of Ulick was somewhere in Europe.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't like they didn't. I don't know how much they had or how big the areas were, but I don't know. I feel like it'd get really crazy if they had like 700.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you have to be in Romania to play that one. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Well, now there is.
I think that would be much more exciting, though, don't you think? That you could, it'd be the most expensive gaming session you've ever been to, but I think that would be wonderful. You'd have to. Yeah. It would encourage travel.
It honestly did, because like if you wanted to play in whatever principality was in Georgia, you had to go to Georgia to play only the special modules that were there. Yeah. You could play the core modules for the realms, but this particular event that he's talking about was a lot of people gathered from all over to play in Florida, so it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I was a teenager, and by teenager I mean just barely, like 13.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize any of that. I was, I played some D&D. It was cool, but I did not remember that at all.
And then that's Carneying an answer. Like I just talked. I really didn't answer mine. So let me.
Please do.
I think my answer to that would be, it was my homebrew world that was a terrible and blatant ripoff of everything that I thought was cool, and it was poorly written. I don't even know if it had a name.
And you were running it, right?
I was running it.
Yeah.
So, well, wait, was that the question? Run or play?
He said run or
Either,
play.
Okay.
Whichever world that you experienced first. So if it was you indeed running something was the first thing you ever experienced, then yeah, that would totally work.
All right. I got to tell you a quick story then, because the first D&D experience I ever had, okay, my parents were not really keen on the idea of me playing Dungeons and Dragons, and for like the religious reasons.
I see.
And so,
by parents, he means our mother. Our
Right.
dad didn't care.
he pretty much. Way to throw mom under the bus. Father's Day. Father's Day. So I had a friend named John Chapman, and I was allowed to go to John Chapman's house. I was allowed to ride my bike there, even though it was pretty far. Now, at this point, I'm like 16, maybe. So when I would go to John Chapman's house, he's like, hey, let's go play D&D with my buddy Roy. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to leave here. I'm not supposed to leave. But what we would do is we'd leave our bikes laying in John's yard, so it looked like we were there. And Roy was old enough that he had a car, and he was just across this major highway. It was literally like zoom, and it was right there. The first game I ever played was Roy ran an advanced Dungeons and Dragons game where we were guarding dwarven ale on a cart. And I don't know what happened in that game, because as soon as we made characters, I was told that charisma, having a low charisma score, meant you were ugly. And right around that time, I got a phone call from John Chapman's mother saying, Tim's dad is here and he wants to know where you are.
Oh, man.
So we jumped up, and in cartoonish fashion, the papers are flying everywhere. We jump into Roy's little like Celica. He zips across the highway, and what do you say when your parents are outside? My dad was outside waiting as I pulled up in Roy's Celica. There's no lying.
There's no,
No,
So I was just like,
nope.
so that was my first experience. It was in Roy's campaign world of
And it's time to make your characters and leave now.
yeah. Maybe we could call it like Tim's Grounded.
But in the case of you trying to lie to this person, you didn't have the charisma available anyway. So
He was real ugly.
I was real ugly. So that's my long.
no, I didn't mean that. I meant in terms of speaking. No.
Yeah. no. So that would be my long-winded answer. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Now speaking as players, then, because as I've been telling Tim over and over constantly since I started speaking with him, obviously big fans of both of you. And as such, I have seen both of you role play a fair bit. Now I'm going to start with you, James, because I actually what fascinates me about role-playing games in general is the fact that from nowhere you seem to draw these characters and you breathe life into them. And I noticed that, James, you when you play you always seem to be a very thoughtful player at the table. You seem very considered. And it just means that you make so many wonderful decisions as a player. And I was wondering, is that something that you've considered yourself? I mean, do you actively think about how you're going to role play a particular character? Do you wait until you're in a session, or what is your process, or do you have a process even?
Yeah, so it's interesting because usually, when I get asked or I decide to play a campaign, you make a character. And so in some cases, you'll talk to the DM. So for example, we'll say my character in the Winds of Cersleen in the Be a Better Game Master world of Ankea. I made a character. I'd never been a Dragonborn. And in fact, I sort of kept some pieces of a character that I had made previously for something else, the game I didn't end up playing. It used to be a half orc. Switched it over to Dragonborn, did all that stuff. And then from there, it's like, well, that's just my stats. And it's kind of not until I get in the game that there's any really consideration of what I'll be like. And I would say that is usually the process. Is sometimes I'll have an idea of how I want my character to act. Like in that case, I'm like, okay, he's a Dragonborn. He's kind of gruff. He wants revenge for his parents, but that's about it. I'm like, okay, not sure exactly how he'll talk. Certainly not sure on an accent or anything, but that's about it. And then when the time comes, and I think this is the part that would bother people the most if they wanted to do it the way we do it. You just kind of open your mouth and see what happens.
So
it's like, that's the one part where I'm like, well, no, you went from here to there, and there's what's happened in between. I'm like, I don't know. It just kind of, especially depending on, what happens, what somebody asks you, what other people are doing.
Sure.
That's usually kind of the process.
It reminds me of that art book that you got, any art book, when you were like, oh, I want to draw. Circle with 3 lines in it. Yeah. Circle with some sketchy details. Full-on picture of an old lady. And you're like, shady and beautiful, and you're like, wait a minute, hold on. There's 5 steps in here that I don't know.
So I feel like a lot of that sort of drawing character from nowhere comes from just our lives together, me and Tim and our other brothers, and just constantly horsing off and being crazy. You just do that with a little bit of direction, and you've got a character for D&D. That's what happens.
No, that is fantastic. And I think I agree with you. I mean, it is until you're in that atmosphere, you're waiting for that spark. And then as soon as someone turns to you and says, what do you do? And I think that is the catalyst, really, isn't it? Exactly. You find yourself dropped in and you've got to go with it. But yeah, no, that's absolutely fantastic. So Tim, as a role player, what I've noticed, because I've watched The Provokers, things like that. What always strikes me about you as a role player is that you are so relaxed. And I want to know, because some of the best advice that I've ever had, and I'm not going to go into this too much, but in the performance side of my life, my career, the advice that is always given, people like Anthony Hopkins say this kind of thing, is that you are playing your character the best when you're relaxed, when you relax into that character, when it's almost like you don't even need to think about it. And I was wondering, Tim, is that an active decision? Do you just relax into a role? Because you always seem so confident and so settled, and you always give yourself pause, time to think for a little bit before you say anything. I was wondering if that is deliberate, or is that something that you've worked on, or is it just how you naturally play the games?
I would say that it is deliberate now, but it's not a choice that I consistently make. I think there was one point that I reached that I thought, I'm going to allow myself the freedom of realizing that when you play a role-playing game, it's not a story that needs to be finished while it's happening. Meaning, we're not writing a piece of fiction. It's a very fluid art form. So I think once I realized and got over just being anal about it being perfect, because that's why I would get tense or nervous, is because I'm like, no, I want this to be good. And I realize good is being okay with others chiming in on the story. And good is being okay with allowing it to be incremental.
Yeah.
It's okay to say in the moment, I want to, like last night we were playing a game and I remember saying, hey, I don't know exactly what. I was talking to Matt Click. I said, I don't know exactly what I want you to know about this NPC. And you don't have to decide right now, but I think it would be interesting if you knew a secret about him.
Yes.
And being able to get to the point to where you're okay with not having every detail filled in, I think is step one to being relaxed. Like you're allowed to retcon and build and shift as part of the process. It's not a mistake. It's a part of how you do things normally. And once I realized that, I thought, well, I can't mess up because whatever I say right now is true.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, I was like, there's no reason to be nervous because how I feel right now and not necessarily creating a moment, but capturing how you feel and just going with it, that is natural. And I don't feel as, pent up and nervous about it, if that makes sense.
And I think for me, the first time I ever felt like that was in our last session of the Winds of Cerceline, because it was sort of that, but the way I would describe something similar, if people are looking for this, I was always worried about what people would say about what I said or did.
Exactly.
I would think, well, how are they going to react? And it's like, well, no, I mean, that's how you simulate a real situation. You have no idea and you have no business worrying about it. Just do your thing. And it's up to the DM or the other players to figure out what they're going to do. But if you're worrying about what everybody's doing, I try to think too much, or like you said, you get nervous or tense and then you leave that relaxation state and you'll never be as close to the character as when you're relaxed, basically, like you said.
Yeah, and I started out in the Cerceline game as one race. My character was one race. And about halfway through, I made the decision that he was a different race. And I just started playing him that way. And that's just how it was. I didn't have to make any apologies or change. It's like, no, I just decided that this makes more sense. It's almost like you're remembering something that already exists.
Yeah.
You're just like, like Bob Ross. It's like, well, let's see, if I remember a happy tree lives here. It's like, if I remember a half elf, I'm a half elf. On the Bob Ross role. Hardly.
That's a fantastic comparison to make. I think, I can see what you're both are saying, actually. And I think if anyone's going to take any advice away from those statements, and I think you really should, I think that's valuable information there, is that really it's an element of trust that you forge with the people that you're playing with or, running a game for. It is not all 100% on you. You can feel absolutely comfortable in allowing, as you said with Matt, to take that element of the story. And I think when you have that, you can't do wrong.
Exactly.
And when it comes to the example that I jumped to, really, with being relaxed as a character, is Durgan. I would say. I mean, he. I think all of the wonderful moments with Durgan's father, for instance, or even to the point of the rage he felt when the corruptor escaped once again.
Right.
All of those times, it was just this. There was no in between. It was just you were completely comfortable in that role, and I think that is a credit to you. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you. Man.
No, it's amazing. And also with the character Rudy or Randolph, whichever it is. I had the pleasure of watching that game this morning, actually, and we are gonna, if you don't mind, go into that a little bit because.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wow.
I did want to bring up one thing.
Go.
I don't know why he doesn't know what his name is. No clue. I just couldn't decide on a name, and then I made 2 overlays, and I thought, I'll just kind of roleplay that, and we'll figure it out. And I'm like, I have no clue, and maybe it'll never get solved.
Yeah. If you want to be relaxed as a player, as a DM, get comfortable with the idea that you can put things out there unfinished. Mm-hmm. That would be my number one piece of advice to be relaxed is it's not supposed to be finished. That's all. If you think of it that way, then there's nothing to be frustrated or nervous or pent up about because it's like, hey, we'll fix that later.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
I mean, that particular example of Rudy Randolph is absolutely fantastic, and I thought even with just that little bit of information, and you could see whilst you were playing him that this guy seems a kind of almost distanced, like he didn't seem to be as bothered about what was going on as the others because he sort of had that kind of distance between him and the situation, which I thought was fascinating. But we're going to come back to that game,
sure,
because there's a lot I want to talk about with it.
Yeah.
However, we're going to go into sort of the creative, or rather your creative process, as it were, in terms of thinking of material for your games and for Absolute Tabletop, that kind of thing. Now, yes, you guys have very creative approaches to maintaining creativity. There's something I've noticed from watching your material. Whether it's like a video where I think it was you, Tim, saying about how once you muted the TV whilst watching a show, and you were trying to like fill in the narrative beats on your own. Or if you take the example of damage reduction, your podcast devoted to building a world, which I think is absolutely fantastic. How do you guys maintain the creative energy to maintain doing the things that you do to keep yourself creative, if you understand what I mean?
So, and we did there's a lot to be said on this, but we specifically did something where we talked about this a little bit, and I feel like it's something I want to tell as many people as possible. But the way you do it is by, for me, doing it, but when you feel like you can't be creative anymore, ingesting other people's creative stuff. Like some people, there are a lot of times where I just want to create, but eventually you have to see what other people created, because that's where inspiration comes from. Even if it's not in the moment, it's not, oh, I saw that thing and I'm inspired to do this thing. It's like, no, I'm reading a book. And I recently read a book that I didn't really like that much, but I'm very happy with having read it. And I just feel like that's just one more bit of reference I'll have. Years down the road, if I'm making something or being creative, that's in my bank now. I have that sort of, that literature, or, that movie that I watched, or that TV show. I just finished the TV show Justified. And they do a few narratively that I would say the number one thing that Justified does really well is they reuse characters better than any show ever. If they need a new person a person to be behind something, they'll pick somebody they already introduced, whether they're a major character or minor, because if you've never seen the show, it doesn't matter. They're a new character. If you have seen the show, they come with so much context, and they do it so well. So just from watching Justified, now I have that. I'm like, oh, do you need a new character? Do the Justified thing and reuse someone. And it's all about taking stuff in order to put out your own. There has to be input for there to be output.
You'll hear us say this a lot in various forms, but you got to fill the cups. And basically, you can't pour out if you're empty, right? And to me, you can't fake a sense of wonder.
Oh.
And if you lose your sense of wonder, you can't be creative. It becomes too mechanical, right? So for me, the trick is to make sure that you take the time to enjoy something for yourself. Now, this is the trickiest balance to strike, because the writer in us all, or the creator, or however you want to say it, too easily wants to say, well, just one more episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation to be inspired, right? And then you never write. So you really have to temper it. But there's another way of putting it that we use in Absolute Tabletop. It's called sharpening the saw, which means if you're always putting out stuff, if you're always, quote unquote, chopping down wood, then it's diminishing returns, because the axe gets dull at some point. And so you're having to work harder to do the same amount of work. And there takes a moment where you have to stop and say, I'm going to recharge.
Yeah.
I'm going to recharge and have a sense of wonder about this thing, whether it's a video game or a television show or even an album by one of your favorite bands. You have to stop and put aside the creative stuff so that those cups can refill. And that sense of wonder is there, because you can't fake it. And that sense of wonder is the fuel that makes it so that the creativity pours out naturally and isn't something that you're just trying to.
Yeah. If you want to get burned out, try creating when you don't feel like creating, and you'll hate it and you'll never create.
But the trick is that if you're on the hook, if it's what you're trying to do professionally, you have to come up with an ecosystem to where you're always in a state of being inspired to create. You can't have too much time off, or else you're not a writer. A lot of people call themselves writers, but they don't write. You're not a writer. You're a thinker. And the world's full of thinkers. Take that step and be a writer, but do what you're saying and make a balance of it.
I would say another way that, and Tim and I have this benefit over most people, but specifically in Absolute Tabletop, we also do. Having 2 people is the best thing for creating. Because even if I'm not jazzed about an idea, I'm like, so Tim, I had this idea for these dwarves. And you're like, actually, what if they were these kind of dwarves? And it's almost like we get to the same cool idea in half the time. Because I would have to sort of ruminate on that or come up with an idea. Next week, I might come up with another one. So between us and then an Absolute Tabletop, one of the ways that I feel more inspired about my own stuff is when Matt or Barker or even Tim is like, hey, look at this thing I made. What do you think about it? Edit it, go in there. And you go in and you just suddenly so much inspiration. And you can sort of expand what they're doing. And then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, but my thing. And it keeps going back and forth where something just gets honed and honed and honed until it's the best idea. And
exactly.
Sort of the more people you have that you trust, the better that's going to be.
Right. And I'll, because we talk a lot, I know that, but I'll say one last thing, and it'll be very, very brief, but it's a quote.
No, it's okay, because this is actually leading into the next question, so this is fantastic.
Perfect. So this quote stuck with me, like so much so that I am considering getting it tattooed on my body, which is, unused creativity is not benign. And I think a lot of creative people, even to the degree I'll say, they get themselves into an actual depression by not expressing themselves in a way that is just wired in them. And so it's important to find an outlet. And for me, the reason why tabletop RPGs is the perfect outlet, this is a secret, don't tell anybody. You only have to do half of it.
A quarter of it.
Maybe. This is what I mean. Rob,
there's 5 people in our new game so that he has to do 1/5 less work.
The other thing is, like, Rob, I don't have to write the whole plot. If I have an idea for a splat book, I just give you the seed of, hey, what if this madman came into power using new technology? Now, if I write it well enough, you're like, wow, this is gold. And the trick is, I haven't written the thing. I just came up with the idea, wrote it out well, and gave it to you. So I love tabletop RPGs because
it's collaborative.
It's collaborative.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back once again to the thing we were discussing earlier, is the fact that, yeah, absolutely, it doesn't need to be finished. You can have the one spark, the one little seed, and you throw it out there, and then it's the game that ignites that into a fully fleshed out, realized idea. We have actually stumbled into what was going to be my next question, which was going to be, you obviously both collaborate in terms of creating Dragon Grim. And it's something that I've discovered. When I was at university, I actually introduced Dungeons and Dragons to a group of my friends. And as we were all studying the same thing, we were all studying theatre and acting. It became a definite thing we had to do all the time. It was just something that we enjoyed doing that much. And I began as DM because I was the only one that had played the game previously. And I ran a campaign. And then after that campaign had finished, my friend then said, I'd like to have a go at being the DM. I was like, absolutely, that's fine. I look forward to playing. He decided that he wanted it to be set in the same world, but in a different area. So he begins his campaign and we play through that. And then instead of just having the 2 worlds with just one story in it, we had one world with 2 stories. And that is how that lore began to develop. Now, we have kind of already sort of mentioned the strengths of building a world together, but is there any way that you think that there would be a strength of building something on your own, or do you think that multiple minds will always be better, or is it okay to have, the one, the overarching puppet master, as it were, of the whole thing?
Okay, that actually brings up a good point, because while Tim and I don't really do this in Absolute Tabletop, we all collaborate on stuff, but we have what's called a project manager. There's one guy that gets to decide, no, that doesn't fit. And I feel like that is very important.
Yes, that sounds
good. To answer your question, it's hard to imagine working on something and not benefiting, saying, hey, Tim, what do you think? Even if I'm not interested in his input equally of mine. If I was going to write a song, which is not something I do, so this is a bad example. But if I was like, all right, I'm writing a song, and I told him, what do you think? He's like, well, the bridge is kind of slow or it doesn't really fit with the rest. even if he doesn't write a new bridge and say, try this, I trust him a lot. And that sort of thing is really going to help me. So it's difficult to imagine where creating something in a vacuum is better than creating something and not showing people you trust. Because you can show people, but I feel like that's a more difficult game to play. But people you trust, Tim or Absolute Tabletop or the Absolute Tabletop community even, hey guys, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
For me is always better than saying, I made this and I don't want anybody to say anything about it, but I do want to show them,
Yeah.
But yeah.
So to me, I think that the key to that is striking the balance of making sure that you don't lose your own creative voice in the editing process of multiple people.
Yeah.
So the biggest way to do that is to make sure, and there's no trick to this, to make sure you're collaborating with people that have similar enough tastes that it's going to be a collaboration and not a, hey, you should do this instead.
Yeah. If I'm like, hey, Tim, I wrote this song, you're like, well, I don't really like metal, so you should make it a techno song instead. I'm like,
exactly.
That doesn't help me at all.
It's not. So you have to, like, the way that I look at the guys in Absolute Tabletop, even with James and myself, the way I always describe it is it's like a Venn diagram, So if you made a Venn diagram of the four of us as circles, that center is pretty big of what we consider like cool. But everyone has an outlying area that no one else touches that's just perfect for them to come in and make sure that they fill in. So is there a benefit to working alone? Yes, if you don't find collaborators that you really feel share your flesh and blood creatively. Yeah. To a degree that the end product is going to be what you imagined it, but polished and things added onto it that you could never do yourself. Not so foreign and different that it doesn't look like what you wanted in the first place, because you'll actually be disappointed in that.
Yeah.
So that would be my thought, is finding the right people. I've often, I have done that to the wrong people before, and it causes frustration, and it causes you to question whether or not you're good at what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And if a creative person questions whether or not they're good, then that's bad news.
It is. Absolutely, 100%. I completely agree with that. No, that's absolutely fantastic answers, though, guys. And for anyone watching, this is gold. Write this down. But I'm actually going to direct the conversation into the direction of Dragon Grin now. I am a huge fan of the concept of Dragon Grin. So in a while, we're going to be talking about the campaign that you've just started. I will say spoilers when that happens, just in case for some reason you haven't, because I feel the way that you deliver information in that particular game is just masterful. It's amazing. But for now, in terms of one of you running a Dragon Grin game, and this is just me being curious, this is just for my own satisfaction, how much do you tell the other about what's going to happen?
So we actually made a decision about this because we realized very quickly, Tim's played in a Dragon Grin game that I've run, and now I'm playing in one that he's running, and we've done in the past. Mm. And there was no easy way to do it, because I was like, well, what do I want you to be surprised as a player, but I don't, exactly what you said. I'm like, it creates a weird situation.
Yeah.
Last night wouldn't have been as cool for me, or probably I wouldn't have done as well as I think I did if I had known some of that stuff. We basically made a decision where we're like, it's not canon unless it's in a book that we write. Okay. So if Tim, I'm like, we both were like, do whatever you want, anything. I mean, he could make it so there was a spaceship there. Now, again, there's that overlap of taste where I'm like, well, I know Tim's not going to throw a spaceship in there. And if he does, he's going to have a really good reason. But the idea is he's allowed to do whatever he wants, and I'm allowed to do whatever I want. And eventually, if necessary or when necessary, we'll add it to the canon, as it goes. Like okay, well, we're writing a book about this portion, so now this, now this is going to happen. And really, that's it. where like it was too difficult to try to keep track of, oh, I want to do this. What do you think?
Right.
It would kind of ruin a lot of the fun of playing the game.
Yeah. Exactly what he said. There has to be a sense of wonder for him as a player to stay inspired, and that's, we started out telling each other a lot of everything.
Yeah.
Hey, here's what's going to happen roughly. Is that cool? Does that work in the world? And then we came to the decision, what we're basically doing is spoiling each other, and it's not fun. And it also gives you too much time to think, and you're overthinking it.
And you can't do anything in the game. You can't make an on-the-fly decision if you think that I won't like it. Or
right.
Vice versa. If you're like, oh, we talked about this, but it'd be really cool if this. You're so constricted. I'm
right.
like, that's never going to be a good game that way.
And the thing is, with someone who plays, and further, who runs a game of tabletop, any kind of tabletop RPG, you're an entertainer. You have to be to some level. So you want to kind of show that magic trick. Yeah. You're letting it unfold. That's part of the sense of wonder, is you're bringing that to the table and letting it unfold. And if you let the other person in on the trick, the magic's gone, even if they only know a little bit.
Yeah.
And that creates a little bit of a leak for the whole group. And so that's where we went with it, which is going way back to the beginning of this video. It's okay if it's half finished.
Yeah.
We can play a full session and go through all this stuff and have a character and have technology or whatever happens. But then it's like a really good, well-acted brainstorming session. And when it is time to write a book, we have all this information to draw from, plus the benefit of having some time pass with new ideas to really refine the idea.
Exactly.
So like, the sessions are like good old-fashioned comic books, and then the splat books are like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where we have an opportunity to weave it all together and like solidify it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So as of now, we don't share much.
Yeah. Especially in this campaign. This campaign, when we started, which you mentioned, we'll talk about it, but nobody knew anything. We had a very rough idea. We were like, no, this is going to be great. Let's do it.
That's fantastic. I think it's high time we address this, because I personally have made a video about the beginning of a Dungeons and Dragons or any kind of campaign, and I think that a lot of the time it is a missed opportunity. The example I give is that if you take a film, for instance, in an opening scene, it establishes an awful lot of information for you as a viewer. It gives you tone, it gives you character, it gives you generally the sense of what this is going to be about. So, Tim, how is it that you came to decide, spoiler alert, if you have not seen the Dragon Grin campaign that came out yesterday, episode 1, Crux, go away, watch it, and then come back. It is not worth watching this to have it spoiled, because it is a beautiful reveal after reveal after reveal. Tim, what drove you to have our characters begin on a crucifix? And with one thing that I will say, I think it is amazing that, I mean, they say that you know a person truly when it comes to the end of their life, or that their life is in a particular, amount of danger. Was that a conscious decision to begin in that manner?
So the real way is that this is how it all came about. I wanted to run a game for what I consider my gaming group. And over time, we've realized this is our gaming group. Yeah. We happen to have met online, but, Nate, Barker, Matt, Cassie, James, even Tila, that's my gaming group. And I realized, I was like, I've never run a game for that group outside of the fabled lost recordings of the 10-hour one-shot.
Which I would adore to hear. Just if I would like to hear that. I really would.
I'm telling you, it would be a really good,
especially after all this time, it would.
Oh man, no, I'm saying it would be a really good learning opportunity, because I feel like my game mastering has changed so much. It's crazy.
Oh gosh.
But I thought, all right, how do you start a campaign in Dragon Grid? And I thought, well, what's the equivalent of meeting in a tavern? And I was like, in Dragon Grin, it's being crucified.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I thought that to me is the equivalent. Instead of like, hey, the Provokers met in a tavern, I was like, no, what's the Dragon Grinian, I guess, equivalent? And I thought, being crucified. So, knowing only that, I pitched it to the group. Now, we're all really busy. Being totally honest, I didn't expect the interest.
Yeah.
These people are my best friends, but we're beyond busy. So I thought, there's already Provokers, there's already Sir Celine. We play in one-shots, I thought. But let me throw it out there. And just throwing that concept out there, just powder keg.
Everybody was on board.
Everyone was like, what? Oh. And so that is where the inspiration came from. I thought, if truly evil reigns supreme in Dragon Grin, how do you show that immediately and with severity? And I thought, that's it.
Now, and I don't know if this is a spoiler for anything in the future. This has nothing to do with this game necessarily, but Tim was previously going to run another game, which would have been his first campaign in Grin. And it was gonna start out and they were all gonna die.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of thing where I'm like, that's how it is. Like, if that tells you anything, it was like they were all gonna die and then through maybe some sort of thing come back alive, and that was how they were gonna live. But it's like, that's just how life is there, man. Like, it sums it up so well.
It really does. So that's the answer to that. I just thought, and it inspired me too. I thought, why are they up there? You know, how would they get out of that? And I thought, let's find out.
And we sort of had a rule where none of us wanted to, but like we could have, I'm sure, but none of us wanted to talk to each other about it. We were like, nope, when we get in the game, we didn't know. I didn't know what characters people were playing. We knew names because Matt did the really cool overlays for us. But we didn't know anything else. You know, we certainly didn't know what was going to happen to Nate. Like, nobody knew, I think, except for Tim and Nate. And even they only had a rough idea. So it was a lot of unknowns, and that made it so cool. It was like we were all watching a movie, but we were playing in it too.
Totally.
I think, and what I really enjoyed about it, like I was mentioning before, was it was a series of reveals. I mean, I think first of all, it was water hitting Barker's character in the face, and then the sack being removed. Now, obviously, if you guys knew that you were all going to start in that position, then that's fine. But as a viewer, just watching that was excellent. And how, first of all, you're introduced to this guy Bart. I believe it was Bart, wasn't it?
Bart.
And he's a human being. You know, that's one thing that I adored, is that, you know, this wasn't some maniacal, crazy, mask-wearing, cultish, fanatical kind of guy. It was just a dude, you know, and he was really just saying, look, it's either you or me up there, so this is just the way it is. And that, once again, reinforces the tone, not by showing, oh, evil has won, and this is an evil person. No, this is a nice guy, and this is what this world is forcing him to do. So it was that as well. And then the introduction of Donovan, which I adored. And this goes back to me saying how relaxed you are as a player. I felt that Donovan had a Tarantino-esque villain kind of vibe to him, because it was so matter of fact. The gangsters don't talk about gangster talk. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
exactly. Like he was just going about it as if this is every day to him. You know, oh, we're going to need shotguns for this job, that kind of deal. Like,
exactly.
And my favorite thing that you did, was when it started, the players were starting to, you know, back chat a little bit, and that you said that he gave a little twitch in his eye, and he says, "You're ruining it." I laughed so hard. I loved it. That this guy, it was almost like he prepared this wonderful little party, this little celebration, and the players were sort of fly in the ointment, as it were. So this was all improvised then. You didn't know, for instance, that what was going to happen with Bart, for example, his final fate. Did you not know that was going to happen?
No, I didn't know any of it. I can tell you, I knew that I wanted to have a character named Bart, who was exactly what you just described. Because to me, it's way scarier to have a good person doing evil things.
Yeah.
Than it is to have an evil person doing evil things. And so I thought so Bart is going to be doing, and I wrote down one note for Bart, and it was, I'm doing this for my daughter. Period. That was the only note I had. And then the other thing I had was Donovan, and I put sort of some phrases down, but they were fragments, and it would be like put together, matter of fact, and that was it. Okay, I didn't even know exactly what voice I was going to use until he got off the wagon, and I thought, okay, I'm this person now.
So we had a few ideas. There were some good, like, oh, this reminds me of so-and-so. Is there somebody you based that character on?
There is. Do you want me to reveal it? I can.
I'm curious. I guess that could be an off-the-record thing, but I had one good guess, and then I saw another really good guess.
I don't think it entirely matters too much if we know. I personally would like to know, but I think that was it was all about you in that moment, man. I wasn't thinking, oh, where's he got this character from?
Sure.
Was straight away. Go ahead.
I certainly don't want to take the magic away from, like I've heard Eddie Vedder say from Pearl Jam. He's like, he doesn't tell people what his songs mean because then it means less than to them with what they thought.
Because they're thinking about what it means.
Right.
Not, yeah.
Okay.
It's based on a memory of a character I saw in a film. So I didn't watch and study and do it. So it's probably removed enough to where you might even watch the film and go, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It was based off of Jake Gyllenhaal's character in the film Nightcrawler.
It's a good one.
I love that performance, but that's not what I wouldn't have called that. So, but
right
now that you've said it, I do see.
And I purposely didn't study up.
Yeah. You didn't want it to be that guy. You just wanted some mannerism.
But I was thinking of his face, and I was thinking of how he was in that film and how matter of fact and vile he was because he knew what people wanted, and then he would just matter of factly say, well, this is what you need, so I have it and you're going to take it. So that's who I based it on.
One person said, and I can see where this is coming from, but I had someone else in mind. Somebody said Christoph Waltz from Inglourious Basterds, his character, like that beginning scene, and that was a good one. But I feel like that character is very sinister.
And that voice, I think would need to go along with it for me to really.
Yeah, but then there was one person where I think like I would have put money on this as the character. There's an actor named Neil McDonough, and there are two things that he was in that he was a kind of weird, deranged, but very put together, the kind of guy to fix his suit after he murders someone. He was in Desperate Housewives, as surprising as that is. Crazy guy. He's blonde hair, like these really bright blue eyes. He looks just insane.
You know him exactly when you see him. He's a character.
I think I know who you mean.
Yep.
And then he was also in Justified. In one season of Justified, he's really big, and he's that kind of like. It was Donovan. It was a Donovan. You know what I mean? Like that's the guy I saw. And right. I mean, honestly, I think that says a lot. I was like, you were killing it, man.
That's it. And I'm glad that everyone saw different people.
Yeah.
It was, like I say, I mean, with the Tarantino kind of thing that I was mentioning earlier, I think there is nothing more terrifying than someone explaining very calmly exactly the situation that they find themselves in. And it doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, I'm going to have my way, and you're going to end up, on a crucifix, blah, blah, blah. So and once again, it buys into that relaxed nature of yours that works so well for so many different characters. I think for both of you. And I think, like I was saying before with I can't remember his name now, Rudy. Rudy's kind of reaction to it at the same time. It was sort of, I believe, wasn't it? You said something like, "This isn't how I die," or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, when it began, I sort of went through a thing where I was surprised that it was crucifixion. I had a few ideas of what might happen to me. Returning to Ukraine. I don't know where he's come from or what he's done, but apparently he's gone back there from somewhere. Who knows? But then, of course, when I got away, I was surprised. I guess it's not. I wanted to play a character that, like you said, was distanced, but not in a John Wayne style. Well, I'm gonna get out of this, so I'm fine. I wanted to play a very exactly what you described. Somebody that seems somehow this terrible thing is happening, and he's like, oh, okay, this is what happens. All right. But not so much that it's like, because he's so tough. You know, I really was trying to walk a line. I felt I was afraid to come off as tough at any one time.
And can I just say that all the players did a really good job of
Absolutely.
just nailing an exact character type. Specifically, the players who seemed a little more world weary and wise didn't come off as, I'm too cool for this crucifixion.
Exactly.
And that, I think, played, which so many players, and it's unfortunate, would just be, I don't know, I feel like they'd kind of step on the cool roleplay situation and just be like, you know, I'm not scared. I'm this.
Yeah.
You know, oh man, everyone was just a little scared. And
one thing I love is that Cassie's character begged to get down.
Yeah,
I was pretty sure nobody was going to give in, but I think she confessed.
She did.
She said she confessed and was like, you know,
like,
at one point begged to get down. I was like, I didn't know who was going to do it. I didn't know if anybody would, but I thought that really added to it. If I were writing as a movie, one person would think that would help them. And I thought that was great.
I think absolutely. I mean, going back to what I said before, with your decision to begin this campaign with all of these characters facing their mortality, facing the fact that this, for all intents and purposes, is the end. And I loved that. Obviously, there wasn't any pre-discussion about this from what you've said, but that each of the characters had their own way of dealing with this Donovan, who's kind of leering and kind of gloating over the fact that this is going to happen to them, whether they like it or not. In particular, I love the bit. There was a bit where Donovan was, or no, I think it was with Bart actually, that Matt Click and his character sort of just flew off the handle, saying he was going to run him through all of a sudden. And I like the idea that perhaps this is seeing how these people actually try and survive, whether it's fight or flight, or whether it's trying to talk their way out of it, it's going to threaten their way out of it. And I just love that there was a whole spectrum, and it's a credit to all of the players involved, of these different reactions of what could occur. And I think that's an important thing to take away as a player watching this tonight, in fact, is that, you know, it is important to truly think about what it would be like to be on a cross. And you're not cooler than it. You're not the one cracking wise up there, you know. It's
rooting, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was a risky decision. I might not have done this with another group, because I knew that half of my session, Rob, was going to take place with them on crosses,
which I love. You've dedicated you played up to the break and they were still on the crosses, or they just coming off them, weren't they? It's like, whoa, I loved it. It was like a bottle episode.
I was hoping that it would play out like it did if they hadn't chosen to be so vulnerable and really just role play these situations. It would have fallen flat.
Yeah,
because some players, and this isn't necessarily our style, but some players would be like, all right, well, what do I have to do to get off here?
Yeah, like, can I roll strength to break the bonds?
Yeah. And it's like, no one did that. In fact, there wasn't a roll, I believe, until after the break.
Because I think, based on the way D&D works, any of us could have rolled, even me as an old man with a strength of 11. If I rolled a 20, I'm breaking those ropes.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to roll.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, no, I can't do, I'm an old man. I'm like, it's not going to happen. I can't do it.
I think the secret is. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I think the secret is that it's to not be afraid of letting your characters fail. I think in storytelling of any kind, you know, it's never exciting if the characters aren't feeling scared or if they're not threatened in any way, and that goes absolutely double for role playing. And I think anyone who encourages the fact that people might not be able to get out of the situation, perhaps they're not going to be strong enough to lift themselves from a cross, or even have the courage to keep a stony face and not answer this call from this guy who's asking for confession. You know, I think that you know, that's far more important in storytelling than you being the person that doesn't succumb, who maintains their composure 100% of the time. And I think that's why so many people enjoy watching you guys. I think it's a very honest way of role playing, and I enjoy it particularly.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, and a good example of failing was, so I decided something that I've never done but wanted to do was play on the idea of not being able to find components for spells.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Like, it went so poorly. Like I thought that as soon as we were in a house, I was like, I want to find something, colored sand, and I thought, oh, spices, and I did it. And usually I would have rolled to see if it worked, but I just asked you. I was like, I want to know if he does it. I want to know if I'm some dummy that's throwing basically dirt at these people, or if it works. And then it did, and it was like, well, it worked, but it didn't work.
Did I get you? Did you think I wasn't going to let you?
I really thought you weren't. And honestly, I was happy. I was happy to not make the decision, because it was as though I was the character, and I'm like, this has got a 50-50 shot at working. Like, who knows? I was so happy. It was like, that was just so awesome.
And again, it allowed you to be surprised as the character, because you were surprised as the character when it went off and it took out a few people's vision, which I enjoyed, and it just made that fight even more desperate. It was a horrible situation. Every encounter so far, they've been getting through by the skin of their teeth, and I think that's the appeal of Dragon Grin, at least, is that it is always by the skin of the teeth.
Yes.
Which is a brilliant thing to have as a kind of like consistent tone. Okay, so we're going to move on a little bit. This is something that I've actually been kind of intrigued by, and this goes towards your work with Absolute Tabletop. For those, if you are watching this and you have never ever, or you don't know what Absolute Tabletop is, although I think that's probably quite rare amongst the community that people who have watched my videos. Go and check them out, because there's some wonderful content out there, and I will be asking you guys in a little bit if there's anything in the future that you'd like to talk about. It's up to you. But in terms of you actually working with Absolute Tabletop, I'm curious, have deadlines, has the management side of it, has the admin changed how you approach creating a campaign or material?
Well, material for like Absolute Tabletop, or material for outside of it, or both?
I think both, and perhaps how you go about managing that, or...
So I would say the number one thing for me is it hasn't changed really anything for me outside of Absolute Tabletop. But I feel like that is to some degree because it hasn't changed that much inside. We have some standards and things we like to do, but overall it's like we throw crazy stuff at each other and see what happens. And it's very rare that anybody's like, no, I don't think that would work. It's more like, all right, how do we make that work? But to answer the first part of the question, which I think is easier, if I'm prepping for a campaign or a character or anything, it hasn't really changed that, whether, jaded me or otherwise, I'm like, no, I mean, so far we've been able to keep it relatively separate, where I don't think it hinders me in any way or anything.
Sure. For me, working under deadline it's just proven to me that you have to just get into a Google Doc or a legal pad or whatever you do and begin, and that it's going to be really bad before it's good.
Really bad, usually up until the last moment.
Yeah, and it's like you have to do that. I think the delusion I operated under for a lot of years, just as a writer, was that books that I had read came out that way, just right away from the writer's head, and that's just not true at all.
Nope.
So I think the thing that deadlines have shown me is you have to get in there and make it ugly, and you just write down. And don't get caught up. If there's a spot in the Google Doc, we use Google Docs. I'll put in brackets, insert something cool here about how, the elves work in the world. And I won't stop, go to Wikipedia, research a culture, watch a Netflix. It's like, you have to get that ugly done first before it can be pretty. That's how the deadlines have affected me, is it makes me continue to write. And I realize that, as James said, it is so scary because it's for about 3/4 of the time, you feel like, oh, this isn't coming together. And I've spent hours and I don't know what's going to happen.
And with it, specifically with a deadline and people expecting, we've said, hey, this book comes out this day.
Right.
It's kind of like we haven't missed the deadline yet, as far as I know, like a release deadline. And it wouldn't be worth missing a release deadline because we didn't like something. It's kind of like, no, this is what we have, so this is what they're getting.
Right.
It better be good. It kind of makes us like, that's what you got to do. You know what I mean? I'm like, no, this is what we have, so this is what they're getting. I hope they like it.
And that intensity after the 3/4 of, I mean, it takes hours and hours, but after 3/4 of that time, when you have 8,000 words written in different docs for different things, that pressure of the last week of writing, knowing you only have 1 week left, it sort of superheats, and you start to see the things that burn away that aren't great, and you start having these wild ideas about how to fit it all together. And then usually right at the finish line, maybe a little after, it clicks and you go, oh, okay, good. Yeah. I'm not a huge idiot, and this is actually decent writing. And with 4 guys working on it together, going through the editing mill, that really helps too. So,
and for those things, I want to say 2 things. One, the beauty of what Tim said. Usually as a writer, you say, put something cool here, and you go back and put something cool there. For us, you say, put something cool there, and somebody will go in and suggest, what if it were this?
Yeah.
And 99.9% of the time, it's, sounds good, that's awesome, let's go for it.
Right.
Unless you had something very specific in mind, which if he had, he should have written it down. You know, that's it. My favorite example is Seward's Under Sandwall. Started out as something Matt had written a long time ago, or he had not written. He had the rough idea and had written maybe like the first 2 parts. And then after a long time, you know, then Tim expanded on that. Before Absolute Tabletop existed, that was something Tim noodled around in. We had all of that stuff. We decided to bring it back. And we had it, and we thought it was pretty cool. We started writing it. It was pretty cool. And then that book, I would say, went the furthest from when we had a rough idea of, okay, let's flesh out these parts, to where it ended up.
Yeah.
Like, it was cool, but it came leagues. Like, I don't even know. It was just,
yeah,
it all fell together with all of us like, oh, and then what if this, and what if this? And
yeah.
It was like, holy cow, this thing is 100% better than it was before.
Yeah,
and
like I'm really proud of that book for that reason. And it's just little things like, hey, here where this happens, what if it was, you know, we'll call it a literary discussion, and we'll put in this factor where there's a book and this, and it's like, oh yeah, I don't know.
That one that's one of my favorite examples, and I feel like it's because, especially on the adventures, when they're nowhere, it's not like, oh, would that happen in Dragon Grin? It's like, no, we all have, there's still a project manager to yes or no things in,
sure,
you know, certain instances.
The final say, yeah.
But it's a little more all of us, because we all, it's like, no, you write this portion, you write this portion, and we'll kind of swap and do edits and stuff.
Right.
So whereas for a Dragon Grin book, it's like, well, we're doing a lot of it, and other people will fill it out, but we got to say, oh, no, that doesn't fit the tone, or
right,
something like that.
So that super long Kearney answer is the deadlines have forced us into trusting ourselves and pushing through. And then how does it affect my games outside? Well, my games outside of what we write seem way more relaxed, and they're fun. They're more of entertainment because I can write sparse notes and wing it.
Yeah.
And that's fun.
Absolutely.
Not having
it is
so much work.
No, I completely understand, though. That's amazing, and I think it is rather fitting. It is kind of beautiful in the fact it's like poetry, it rhymes, that you have you once again, you know, you're not a writer if you're not writing, so the deadline is making you write. You know, it's allowing you to trust in not only your gaming group, but obviously the group of people that you're now working with, to help you handle that mass of creativity and those ideas. I think it's just a beautiful storm in which a lot of really good work has been created. So
Thank you.
and you have to be applauded for it. You must be. So there we are. Now I think we're sort of. I think that's a nice little kind of end there. But there's one last thing that I'd like to ask, and also like to suggest, if you don't mind. I think it would be great for you to tell us. You don't have to, but is there anything you can tell us about the future of Absolute Tabletop? and Tabletop Terrors. Is there anything that we can expect? Is there anything that's due to be released soon that you're at liberty to talk about? I don't obviously want to know if you're not, but well, of course I want to know, but
oh yeah. No pressure. Well, we do actually. There are certainly, I'd say, a solid 3 things we can absolutely talk about, and even some that we didn't talk to anybody about, but we could talk about.
Sure. The thing that James and I are working on, we'll put a pin in for a second and say, the next release from Absolute Tabletop that you're going to see is actually a new form of something that we already have, which is physical copies rather of the books.
Yes.
That's the number one thing we've been working on, is having the AbTab books on the shelf. And it's been a long journey for us because we did not create the books from the outset prepared for that.
In fact, we didn't know what we needed to do anyway.
Right.
So the most of the time has been figuring it out, and a lot of it's been waiting because we're like, all right, we have this idea, we submit it to the print company, and in 5 days they'll tell us if it's good enough or if there's something wrong.
Right.
And then if something is wrong,
interesting.
which happened at least once, we resubmit. Then we have one shipped to us and say, okay, well, before we allow people to purchase these, we need to make sure they look okay. And they ship it to us, and we're like, oh, okay, we need to fix that. So it's been incremental changes and a little bit of waiting. But once we get it handled, which we did, if you've seen Matt's, Matt clicked a video of showing off one of the books, which is just the coolest.
It's mind-blowing, man. Holding a book you helped write is just
ridiculous. But
it's awesome.
I can imagine.
We do that, then we can handle, basically doing the rest of them and allowing people to purchase them. Which, if nobody else buys a copy, I'll be happy to have the books that I helped make in my hands.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal for me.
That's the first thing, is by the end of summer, we want to have all of our books that are currently available on absolutetabletop.com available physical copies.
Yeah.
And I think they really do deserve to be on a bookshelf. From all the stuff that I've read from that you've created, it's beautiful work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So real copies. What else?
So following that, the next supplement we're coming out with is in the world of Aeronoth, and that is going to be Matt Click's Stone Rift supplement.
Yes.
Which I'm super excited about. My character from the Provokers campaign happens to be from Stone Rift. And so, oh man, it's cool. We were actually, Matt and I and James and Barker were just writing some Stone Rift stuff on Friday. Actually, just working on some stuff, and I can't really reveal exactly what, but I think that as we've played in the campaign world, the world has organically grown, and now Matt has a completed map of Aeronoth, and I think he's getting the really firm grasp on what the world is, and I think you're going to see that Stone Rift is going to be a little more refined and robust than even some of the excellent work we've seen in the Aeronoth series.
Yeah.
The final thing, and I don't know when this is going to be, but the thing that James and I have been toiling away on in the background, kind of, we're going to see, but it's going to be our biggest, most ambitious release to date, definitely as Tabletop Terrors and Absolute Tabletop, maybe even.
Yeah. Because I think we currently hold the record for most pages in a supplement
with
still.
the Copper Jackals.
With the Copper Jackals.
Oh, yes. I remember reading that somewhere. Absolutely.
In the same amount of time. I think the important thing about that is that we still give it the same amount of time to be written and laid out and everything as everything else. So that is an interesting experience to be like, well, how did we even manage to do that?
It blows my mind.
So this
is there an element of competition in that regard?
I don't think so. I think we're like, it's funny the way you it is, because you're like, when you see the project manager's outline, you're like, yeah, we got to do that.
You're like, we have to do that.
You're right.
You realize, you're like,
and then you're like, oh man. And then they come up with, well, I think, like, for instance, Campaign Master, Barker's Be a Better Campaign Master book 1. He's like, hey, I think we need to do D100 roll tables for all this stuff. And there is a part of your brain that's like, oh man, are you crazy? I'm like, what? But 75% of you is like, but yeah, we've got to do that. And so I think the competition is more to make it the thing we're like, we gotta.
it's almost like we're all holding out, refusing to say no. And one day we might hit that point where it's like we couldn't do it all. We couldn't do everything we wanted to. But so far, it's been like, Tim, because we have like a hangout to talk about the supplement and the outline. When we outlined Copper Jackals, we didn't say this is going to be 150 pages or 120.
Right.
But as you do it and you're writing it, and then you're like, okay, well, roughly 1 page of a Google Doc is going to be about 2 pages laid out at least, not including art. And you're like, okay, well, if we have this many pages in this roll table and we're adding stuff, I'm like, this is going to be 150 pages, you know? So it's more like a competition of, well, let's see how much we can get done without having to give up or give in.
Right. And like for the Copper Jackals factions called chapters, we actually, we started making them. And then James and I put into the doc, into the outline and into the Google Docs, were like a spot for 20 of them.
Yeah, like just 20 empty bullets. And like a few, we had a few ideas for a couple.
And I'm just waiting for Matt or Barker to go, nah. And I was prepped for that. I was like, yeah, they're going to turn this down. But
it's like a negotiation. You go high because when they say we got to cut it, we're like, all right, we'll cut it to 10.
We'll do 10. And that's kind of what I thought. And then I kept writing and James kept writing and we kept working on it. And they were like, yeah, man, 20 chapters. And I was like, oh, no, you guys are in?
Exactly. Like, I kind of didn't plan on this, but that happens a lot.
So Rabbit Trail to say, the thing that we're really excited to put out is it's going to be called, I don't know if it's or the, I think
It's probably going to be you drop whatever it won't be on the cover.
It's The Dead Man's Guide to Dragon Grin.
That's sensational.
And,
That's amazing.
It's going to be our campaign world book. And it's the thing that we're toiling over is that we don't want to fill in so many spaces that the players and game masters have to learn geography and history.
I think that's an intimidating factor for a lot of sort of pay for settings, really, isn't it? That you've got to know everything there. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and so, but still making sure there's enough so that people don't say this is half completed.
Yeah, of course.
So we were actually just talking about it, and we're working on it slowly. And to give you an example of what you might find, for the locations, we're staying away from population 36,000. So it'll say population relatively dense considering the weather. And then that's like, okay, that means something different to everyone.
Yeah, it's almost the way we're trying to do it is if you were a DM, like if we want to run a game here and somebody asks you, like if I asked him in last night's game, well, where are we? He might not have known. And if he didn't know, he would come up with something good and we'd go from there. But the idea is if a player says, well, where are we? We tried to be like, okay, well, what would a person in the world say? Not an omniscient person that knows everything. You don't know that there's 36,000 people living here. It's no. I'm like, there's not a sign in front of the town that says that. There's not a census, maybe. You know, it's like, this is a village. Like, the idea is you see a village, it looks like there's about 10 houses, assuming about 4 people per house, 40 people.
James's cat just jumped across the room.
Surprise attack. There we go.
Yes.
That was the surprise round right there.
Okay. That was great.
Is everything okay? You looked horrified. I did not know what happened.
I saw his energy drink tilt toward his keyboard of his
It's empty, but that doesn't stop
Highline gaming laptop.
The other thing is, so the cat tried to jump onto one of our very rickety lights that we use. Like I would say studio light, but it's like, it's made to hold its own weight up. I think she thought it was a platform. Tried to jump on it. Diverted. Like we're lucky she didn't land on my computer. So there was a lot of fear. That said,
all that to say, we're going to map out Dragon Grin and have those areas we want it to be inspirational overall. We want it to be an atlas of inspiration is kind of what we're saying. And when you flip it open, it's not a science book. It's not a textbook of learn this, this, and this, but just enough information to allow you to kind of add the spark and set it off.
Almost like a reference book.
Right. So that's what we're working on right now is The Dead Man's Guide to Dragon Grin, and hopefully that'll be out before the end of the year.
Yeah. And then the last thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the last thing that we haven't really officially said, but it's just we are doing more and more with other things. Last night I made a joke, and by joke I mean I'm really doing this, about I need a Dragon Grin shirt. So we're going to see about doing that. Even like, again, if nobody buys them, I'm going to buy one and I'm going to wear it because I just am so excited. And another one was we've seen Matt's Aeronauts map, and we are toying with, we're getting a sample sent to us of that printed on a poster to see if it looks good enough. Because again, if nobody else buys it, I am buying an Aeronauts map for myself.
Yeah, I want an Aeronauts map signed by all the provokers personally.
Yeah, so it's the kind of thing where that's another thing we're considering. That, like I said, isn't official. We'll get it. Hopefully, if it's like of good enough quality and shipped, not bent or something weird, then that might be something we offer.
Yeah, so I think that that's probably most of it.
Yeah, that's about
most of it. There's always more. Those all sound like incredibly exciting things that I cannot wait to see. That is going to be absolutely fantastic. And for any of you guys watching who haven't, check out Absolute Tabletop. Their stuff is so refreshing to just look into. It basically, all of your stuff cuts to the core as to what will make what will be practical and interesting to use in your games. And I think that is one of the most important things when running a game such as this. Guys, this has been absolutely incredible. I'd like to take a moment just to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I've been a big fan for a long time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you go from strength to strength even further. It seems like all of you guys are on an unstoppable ride here at the moment.
Oh, thanks.
Well, yeah, awesome. That's great.
And thank you. I think you're a great interviewer. I think you definitely, especially between the wicked good accent and that charisma, I feel like I'm being interviewed by NPR about RPG.
Oh, well, that's it. I've never interviewed anyone in my life, so there we go. That's something. Yeah,
I think it's great, man. And we got to figure out when we can get you in one of our games here sometime soon.
Oh my God! Don't even. I will be. I drop a hat and I will catch the hat. I will be there.
I gotta get you the Dragon Grin game.
Yeah, man.
Well, if you need an evil guy with a British accent in Dragon Grin that is like a walk-on cameo, then
yeah.
I was gonna say there are so many of those in Dragon Grin that it's like a racial stereotype.
Yeah, of course. I just like that race evil. That's all I am. No, that's fantastic. Well then, guys, I suppose that's that. Plug your stuff, man. Go for it, both of you.
So I would say the number one thing is, like you said, Absolute Tabletop. You can find us at absolutetabletop.com to see our supplements and see what we do have. Check that out. The other thing I love mentioning is we have a Facebook group, the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group. Mm-hmm. This is just a really cool community that people can go to, run games, get inspiration, just talk to other people, potentially like-minded, inspirational people about Absolute Tabletop, about anything else you want. It doesn't matter. And I think that's worth checking out if you're trying to get into games or trying to find more like-minded people that like maybe Dungeons and Dragons, or it doesn't matter, Fate, Shadowrun, any RPGs, tabletop RPGs. Check that out. I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, Tabletop Terrors, our YouTube channel.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, absolutely do that. I mean, this is how I managed to get in touch with you guys. Even if it's just you down to wanting to create content for YouTube or just for your own games, get on there. There's a wealth of opportunity there. So I think that's about it, guys. This has been an absolute pleasure. And for all of you watching, if you have any ideas on who should be my next guest on Critical Conversations, whack that in the comments below. If you've liked what you've seen, don't forget to hit the like button, or hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, or not. We're all friends here, or are we? Guys, what would you like to say before you go?
What do we say, Tim?
Until next time, may your dice roll high.
Dice roll high, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard.